Thank you, Nicole, and I'm honored and delighted to be here and really thrilled to see how many people have joined. Sorry we can't all be in one place and actually party together a little bit later. So I'm Bill Weihl. I had the good fortune to lead sustainability and clean energy work at Google and Facebook. And then a few months ago started a new initiative called ClimateVoice. We are working to get companies to really go all in on climate in particular. This panel is 30 years of sustainability in business, but it's looking back and looking forward. The Business Environmental Awards have been going on. This is the 30th anniversary. And so we're going to look back 3 decades, but also we're going to try to look forward a little bit and talk about where things might be going. We've got a great group of panelists, and actually panelists, if you guys want to turn your video on, that would be great. You can find detailed biographies of them in the event program. So I'm going to introduce them quite briefly and then give them each a chance to say a bit more about their awards, and then we'll have a conversation. So first we have Bessma Aljarbou. She leads Apple's clean energy program. She's responsible for transitioning Apple's global supply chain to renewable energy, which sounds like a pretty daunting task. I was involved at Google and Facebook in our own energy, but the entire global supply chain sounds like quite something. She spent the last decade bringing clean tech technologies and businesses to market, including in places like Qnovo and First Solar. She's an alumna of MIT Sloan, the Harvard Kennedy School, and the University of Virginia. I should say Apple received a BEA special commendation in 1993, and then won a Business Environmental Award in 1995. So they were quite early in our 30-year history here. Second, we have Ahmed Rahim. Ahmed is co-founder and CEO of Numi Organic Tea, one of the largest premium organic fair trade certified tea companies in North America. He's also an advisor and board member to a number of sustainable businesses with emerging innovative products. And Numi Organic Tea won a Business Environmental Award in 2010. And then third, we have Anni Tilt. Annie's a principal at Arkin Architects, as you just saw, though didn't hear, sadly, at least the acceptance speech. Arkin Tilt just won an award. In fact, they won awards in 2000, 2016, and again this year. They're a Berkeley-based firm widely known for excellence in sustainability and design. And Annie is particularly interested in the intersection of design, construction, and the natural world. She's the founding member of the California Straw Building Association and has served on numerous award juries. So panelists, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations on the awards for your companies. So I'm going to ask each of you in turn to tell us a bit more about what your award, or in the case of Arkin Tilt, awards were for. What was innovative or important about the work that you were recognized for, and then we'll continue the conversation talking about how things have evolved since then and where things are going from there. So maybe, Annie, why don't we start with you? Tell us a bit more about the various awards and what was important about it.
I guess I better unmute, huh? I will say thank you to Acterra. I'm sorry I didn't get to hear it, but that's the gist of it. Is we're really pleased to be an award winner here. I think that what's interesting to me is that the first award in 2000, we were a very small firm. We're still not a very big firm, but we established very early on 5 goals, and our entire practice is based around sustainability, and so we were recognized early for that. And then in 2016 for the Project Green Home in Palo Alto, great collaboration with the owners of that for a passive house building. It's performing really well, very proud of that. And then finally for this prepared food annex for the natural grocery company, just an amazing company, employee owned, really focused on the community, care deeply about making those connections, providing healthy food that's prepared in what is otherwise a bit of a food desert in that section. We help them transform this a little bit of an ugly duckling, and by just kind of revealing its structure, revealing the photovoltaic panels. You can peek into the kitchen. We've reused the ceiling boards that we took out as paneling, just having them walk their talk. We're really pleased to be part of that. So I'm sure we'll say something like that again. And I just wanted to say that those sustainability goals that we established early on and we continue to use, again, we're kind of trying different methods. We're always trying to innovate and look to new systems and are always trying to learn. There's always more to take in. There's a lot of experimentation going on out there. But again, the principles are the same. And I think what we're coming around to is with the carbon focus, those early natural building materials that we work with are now, with their ability to sequester carbon, are more relevant than ever.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's turn to Ahmed. Ahmed, if you could tell us a bit about the award you folks won in 2010 and how you think about sustainability overall.
Yeah, thank you, Acterra, and thank you, Bill. I mean, back in 2010, we were still a little baby, just almost 10 years old as a company, and now Numi just turned 20. But in 2010, we're one of the founding B Corps. When B Corp started around 12 years ago, there were 30 organizations and that were handpicked to really represent what does the future look like for the B Corp, and we were fortunate to be one of them. And so the award was around that, as well as really our reducing our environmental footprint, which we've completely revamped even in the last 5-10 years, now going completely climate neutral, which I'll talk about a little later, as well as offsetting our emissions, which we continue to do even now with solar and so many other ways. And then obviously one of our big hallmarks as a company and as a brand is our fair trade and fair labor, being one of the largest here in North America. Just the working conditions. We work with over 15,000 organic fair trade farmers and their families around the world in over 35 countries. So just we're really just our practices and our fair labor traditions that have really expanded back then in 2010 were some of the reasons that we were awarded the Acterra. And as far as, how I see sustainability, I think it's, the global warming is by far, the most important topic that business owners need to look at and really be proactive in their approach to finding solutions. There's nothing more important because we wouldn't be here without a healthy planet and a healthy society. So I think it's in front of every single initiative we make decisions at Numi and any other organizations that I even consider or get involved with, because without that we're not going to have a future, and it's not going to be anything sustainable for us to be on. So I think I wouldn't use necessarily the word sustainability, but just the overall health of our planet and well-being is paramount to every choice we make, both as individuals, as organizations, and hopefully as communities and leaders in the world and in governments and so on. So,
couldn't agree more. Thank you. So Bessma, can you tell us about, you've been at actually Apple for just a couple years now, I think, is that right? A few years. So you certainly weren't there back in the mid-90s, but say a little bit, maybe if you can, about what those awards were for, and then maybe just then segue into telling us about how Apple's approach to sustainability has evolved since then. That's been a long time. and what your focus is now.
Great, happy to do so. Hi, hello everybody. Thank you, Acterra. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and hoping that a 4-year-old doesn't come and also try to introduce himself at some point. I was able to actually get a hold of the program brochures from 1993 and 1995, and so it was really amazing to see the awards not just that Apple was getting, but that others were getting, and just how far corporate sustainability programs and initiatives have come. So the first was a special commendation in 1993 for polystyrene packaging recycling. And then the second was an award in 1995 for a commute alternatives program. So we've come a very long way since then. I mean, I'm happy to jump into kind of what we're doing now. I mean, we obviously had a long history. The earlier you get involved in environmental work, you know, we've been building on that. Our work is currently led by Lisa Jackson, and she was, you know, formerly used to head the EPA under President Obama. And when she joined, I mean, we had a lot of different environmental initiatives happening across the company. And what was great about when she joined is she really brought things together and under 3 different focus areas. The first is climate change, of which kind of our renewable energy work is one of the main pillars driving that. The second is smarter chemistry, ensuring that all the materials that we use in our devices and everything that we make, everything that everyone touches and uses, all the people who work and manufacture and even recycle our products are using safe materials. And then finally, resources is the third area. And that's like the most ambitious goal, is how do we preserve the precious resources? And we set ourselves this audacious goal of, you know, can we make but not take? And how do we use only renewable and recycled materials? So that's kind of how we've moved from our earlier work to kind of these big ambitions that we're driving hard towards. So right now we publish annually our comprehensive corporate carbon footprint, where you can see everything. So we've done a lot of detailed work to find, okay, where are the emissions, and create focus programs to tackle those areas. And so we've managed since 2011 to reduce our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions by 64%, which is huge. But 3/4 of our remaining carbon footprint is actually scope 3. It's in our supply chain, in the manufacturing. And so we've been working on that for many years, and I'll share more about that later. But I'd say like a growing trend amongst companies is beginning to start to focus on their scope 3 emissions and not just their own internal emissions. I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that's actually, Apple, I think, was one of the pioneers in really looking not just at their own internal operations, but upstream and downstream, both the supply chain and the use of energy by that your products use when your customers like me and others are using them. And I think that's really important to understand what those are and look for ways to reduce them. Well, so maybe let's talk about then electrification and electricity. The cartoon we often cite for how to address climate change is, first, electrify everything. And it's really almost everything. There's some things, obviously, we can't electrify. And second, eliminate carbon from electricity generation. So electrification, making electricity more sustainable, is a growing issue. It's a growing area of focus for Acterra. Annie, maybe we could start with you, if you could talk a little bit about how you see the built environment evolving in the coming decades as we seek to electrify everything and address climate change. And you're muted. It wouldn't be a Zoom call if that didn't happen at least once.
It's a theme. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an energy expert, but I recently saw a talk by a Panama Bartholomew of the Building Decarbonization Coalition that really brought home to me the challenges of natural gas, and how really as a system between the health issues and the leakage, the methane that's released in the atmosphere, and it can be as actually as bad as coal, you know, depending on the level of leakage, that this is something we need to move away from. And you know, we have been doing all electric homes for some time now. I think that technology is very solid. There are good options. There's a little more upfront cost, but it's generally savings over time. You know, induction cooking, I'm sure Acterra has good programs that address all these. It is actually the use of natural gas for new construction in Berkeley has been banned. So they are really ramping that up, but also, you know, also for commercial buildings, and that is going to be a more challenging hurdle. But again, I think the manufacturers are catching up. So I just want to make a plug, and I think that you know, sometimes the electrical energy mode can be a little bit more expensive, but really what we try and do is kind of first principles is use natural systems, passive solar, natural ventilation, to a good thermal envelope to reduce that energy use in the first place, so that the photovoltaic systems that you're adding are minimized. So you're really kind of dialing that back before starting in on it. I mean, I think we're creating healthier buildings as a result.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you know, just listening to you folks and thinking about the past 30 years of business environmental awards. I think Acterra has been around for 50, I think. I feel like a newcomer to this field. I mean, I got into it professionally in 2006, but certainly remember hearing about passive houses and other things 40 plus years ago. I think they are finally becoming, if not quite mainstream, much more common, which I think is good to see. Bessma, maybe this would be a good place for you to talk about what Apple is doing on the renewable energy front and electrification broadly, especially in the supply chain, which I know is your focus.
Okay, great. Well, I want to second Annie on energy efficiency, right? For the cleanest energy is the energy you don't use. So we have strong programs both for our corporate use, but also for our supply chain. And then switching to renewable energy, after a decade of work, so in 2018, we announced that Apple had achieved 100% renewable energy for all of our operations. So that's all of our retail stores, our corporate facilities, and our data centers in 43 countries and counting. And so that was a lot of work to get there. And we're taking that same ambition of 100% renewable to our global supply chain. As I said before, like 3/4 of our remaining carbon footprint is in manufacturing. And actually of that, half of the emissions are coming from the electricity that our manufacturing partners are using. So it's quite a large impact. And so we launched the program in 2015 and are really proud to say that we now have over 5 gigawatts in commitments. And that's coming from 44 suppliers. And to give a sense of scale on kind of supply chain versus corporate, those commitments themselves of 5 gigawatts are about 4 times the renewable energy that's needed to cover Apple's own corporate operations. So the opportunity for impact is huge. And so as we operate on this global scale, we're also very purposeful in how we pursue the strongest possible renewable energy resources. I mean, Bill, you're very, very familiar with this type of work and the philosophies behind it, right? We prioritize local solutions, local renewable energy solutions to the extent possible. And so that's like within the same electricity grid where it's being consumed. And then we prioritize materiality, where we want our involvement in a renewable energy project to be a driving force to getting it built.
Awesome, thank you. Ahmed, let's turn to food. That's an enormous issue as well, and it certainly, it's a part of the climate issue, but also it engages other environmental issues beyond climate, and certainly touches human health, sustainable development. You deal with a complex global supply chain for your products. Tell us about how you deal with that and how you see sustainability for food systems evolving in the coming decades, the next 30 years, or however long you're willing to forecast.
Wow, the tall question. Well, you know, I think to what I was talking about earlier, Bill, and it really is every decision that manufacturers make, because manufacturers are responsible for the outcome of what happens in this world, whatever we're doing. And for us, it starts in every single product and element from packaging. You know, we've now, of over 10, 15 years of working, we've now just launched the first compostable overwrap, a plant-based overwrap for all of our tea bags, which are made from renewable plant-based sugarcane and eucalyptus. And, you know, that's just reducing the fossil fuels. So that's one way, because as we know, the plastics in the oceans are, and in all the developing countries and everywhere, is just enormous. So from packaging, we look at every single wrapper, and, you know, obviously getting rid of all the plastics, to, you know, just our overall commitments. You know, we've pledged to be completely climate neutral, certified, and that means we measure our whole entire supply chain, the carbon footprint there, and we offset our annual emissions, and then, you know, we obviously work on strategies of how we reduce these carbon emissions. So every single part of what we're doing is important, and, you know, a big theme for us is obviously farmers, as I was talking about earlier. It's really the health of the farmers is a big issue for us on climate. You know, it's making sure they're working in organic fields, and we have the deep partnerships and the verification programs. I think it's so important to protect this health of the workers, because they are, I mean, even now in today's world, the farmers are the heroes. They're bringing us the food, just like the teachers and the nurses. And so for us, the farmers have always been the heroes. They're the ones who bring everything to us to enjoy and relish. So for us, it's long-term sustainable benefits. We've done all kinds of things, from new roads and schools to mosquito nets, really making sure that their sustainable welfare is taken care of. We've done long-term projects from biodiversity of the soils and supporting their ecosystems. And over the last few years, we started a project called Together for Hope, and that's just bringing them some of their basic needs like clean water. Most of our farming communities in developing countries never had access to clean, safe drinking water. So we went and drilled wells in Madagascar, where we source our turmeric. They were literally drinking dirty river water. So we installed 23 wells for these 4,000 family members. We just did the same in India, where we work with 6,000 farmers and their families, really cleaning all their water systems and doing education. And, you know, for the next 30 years, and then, sorry, we're doing that right now in South Africa and Egypt as we speak. But I think for us, we just really want to shift towards just production of everything that's dealing with sustainability, that all companies do more. You know, our new sort of consumer facing and just overall company ethos is activate purpose, so that we all have the responsibility to do this work. It's not just on us. Sure, we're a great a gatekeeper and also a bridge to educate and to do the work, but we need everyone to really support this work. And there's a group I started called OSC Squared, One Step Closer to an Organic Sustainable Community. I started 8 years ago with Laura, and that's bringing 40 CEOs of other sustainable businesses together, and together we collaboratively work on this, which I'll be happy to share a little later about some of our climate collaborative and packaging collaborative in JEDI. But I see the future is all about collaboration and really bringing more powers together, because we're silos in our own, because it does take a big effort to really make these initiatives happen. And one company can do so much, but how can we do it together as a group? So I think collaboration and really looking at every single element of what we do and how we do it is really at the core of the solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I was fortunate to be involved in several collaborative multi-company efforts at Google, and then especially at Facebook. And I would agree that you can get so much more done together than individually. So let's come back to the collaboration in a couple minutes. You know, part of what you were saying, I think, really got at the fact that sustainability is a very complex systems problem. Climate is a complex systems problem. It's not about just the energy that buildings consume. It's about the embodied materials. It's about all sorts of other things. Food systems involve agriculture and transport and processing and so on. So you talked a bit about that, Ahmed, but I'm wondering, Annie, if you could say a little bit about how these different parts of, you know, the system, when you're thinking about building design, or not just an individual building, but the context in which it's sited, how that shows up in your work.
Yeah, I think that the systems approach in architecture is a many layered thing, right? There's a lot of systems that are integrated into each building, even the smallest building. There are, you know, there's lighting and heating and structure and roofing, and, you know, all of those things have to come together. But I think what we are trying to connect to are those greater systems, the natural systems, especially within the context of climate change. And these are issues where I have to rely on other experts. And you know, and I feel like that information is out there. One of the exciting developments just in the last, you know, year and a half is doing embodied carbon accounting, and there are programs now that are really studying it, so you understand the embodied carbon. And just to be clear that first of all, the building stock is an enormous impact on the carbon footprint. It's usually considered to be about 40%, and you know, in terms of operational energy, I think as a profession, we are doing quite well in addressing that operational energy with renewable sources. But the embodied carbon, because it is happening now in this sort of critical time period, people are realizing that this is what is really making a big impact. So this is what really we need to address. So now we've got systems, which, I mean, we did on Zoom calls anyway, right? All over the world who are really interested in these issues, who can give you a very clear picture and of you know, what those impacts can be. So again, you know, as a small practitioner, we don't have a department that can look into these things, but we are connected to this web of great research, which is wonderful to take advantage of.
Yeah, and that's another example of the kind of collaboration in some ways that Ahmed was mentioning. That, I mean, certainly I would say in the work I did over the last 15 years in sustainability, the need for collaboration, relying on other people's expertise, was much greater than anything else I've done in my life. You know, almost anything you do is going to touch many different fields and many different disciplines. You can't be an expert in all of it, so I think that's great.
Can I just add, there's a question about, directed to me personally, thank you, David Smirnoff, about how do you maintain hope? And I think that what what we have been really excited about is the ability for building materials to actually sequester carbon. So you can actually store that carbon in your building. So rather than just trying to get to net zero, which is a great goal, there can be actually, you actually are making a difference. You're going in the right direction, not just less in the wrong direction. And these are building materials that are near and dear to us, biogenic materials like straw bale and bamboo, ideally rapidly renewable. And I think that's very exciting, and I think there's a lot of potential there. Yeah, I'd like people to get out there and do more with it. So I think that's what gives us hope, is that, between the successes of the entire profession taking on operational energy and this great potential in the next wave. I mean, we got to do it really quickly, but I think that there is a lot of hope within our profession. That's happening.
Hope is good. We need more. So let's kind of sort of build on that collaboration theme a little bit. Bessma, maybe you could talk a bit about Apple has a big, complex supply chain. You're trying to work with them around clean energy. How do you collaborate with them? What does that look like? And
Yes, that's a great question. I mean, we do a lot to support our suppliers through their whole environmental journey. I'd say it starts with that we want to work with them similar to what the path that we've taken for ourselves is to figure out, okay, well, where are your emissions? So starting out with the data, with an emissions survey to figure out their annual greenhouse gas footprint, and so part of that, they give their detailed electricity, where they're operating, how much electricity they're using for Apple, what are the sources of electricity, as far as they know. It's really educating them just to answer those questions that most companies don't necessarily think about every day. And then we work with them to simplify it, interpret the data, and then identify the hotspots and plug them into some of the programs that we have. So for the clean energy program, we require that any supplier who joins it is making a 100% commitment. 100% of their renewable energy for Apple-related load is going to be from renewable electricity. And so we've created, from all the learnings that we've had in doing projects around the world, we've created this clean energy portal, which is an education portal for our suppliers. It takes them, it's like the A to Z of how to do this. It's in their local markets, local policy information, local language. So that's one part, that's the education side. The second would be, we connect them to resources, right? Connect them to developers. A good example of that would be a number of our suppliers were having difficulties in the locations that they were in, especially in China. They had no access to renewable energy. There were no options. And so we created this China Clean Energy Fund. It's very difficult for any company to make a single investment in a renewable energy project. It's a lot of work. And so we kind of created this third-party managed fund, but in which suppliers of all sizes, large ones, small ones, were able to join and make commitments and invest money into this fund. And so the fund has $300 million committed from over 10 suppliers, and that's going to basically support the development of about 1 gigawatt of wind and solar projects in China. And so that's one way we've not just connected them with a solution, but we've kind of helped overcome their local barriers. And so that's making good progress. We closed our first investments on 3 wind farms in July of 134 megawatts. And then the final thing is really working together with our suppliers on policy advocacy. So we're not just collaborating with our suppliers, we're collaborating with NGOs and with local industry associations and trying to make a community of very different people pushing on policy.
Which is certainly a huge part of the solution as much as we need innovation, new technologies, new materials, and so on. We need to make these transitions, certainly on climate, rapidly. And without smart policy, that's just not going to happen, I think, fast enough. So it's good to hear that you folks are engaged in that. Ahmed, you alluded to the collaborative work you're doing. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure, Bill. So yeah, about 8-9 years ago, started a group with my partner Laura, and it was really inspired just by all these incredible sustainable leaders out in the world, but just the idea that we're all working in silos and not really holding each other's hands or using our resources and shared opportunities to really scale, because maybe one's selling 100 million, but 10 companies are now purchasing power of 1 billion, 2 billion. So how do we really leverage that? Because the larger organizations, you know, may not have as much of a focus on their triple, quadruple bottom lines of social and environmental sustainable causes. But for us, it was really easy to come together with a bunch of CEOs, and we meet regularly every month. You know, there's around 35, 40 of us, but beyond supporting each other and really working within our organizations as CEOs, we really look to the industry too, to really influence the industry. So we launched the Climate Collaborative, which has 9 areas in which people can make commitments, from food waste to energy to technology to transportation to packaging. 650 companies with over 3,000 commitments. You know, it's from the Patagonias to the General Mills to the, you know, much larger companies, as well as the brands that are more driving the bottom grassroots sort of movement. But it's creating that movement, it's creating that energy, and I think that's where things will shift. You know, when we launched OSC, we launched with the Packaging Collaborative because we knew that packaging was the Achilles heel for every single brand. The amount of petroleum that's created to create all this plastic material, there aren't solutions. So it took a conglomerate of around 40, 50 brands to not put pressure, but put the demand and request on the converters, the packaging organizations, the flexible film, to say, we don't want just petroleum heat sealable material. We need an option. Similar with climate, such a major issue, nobody knew how to tackle it. So when we were able to break it down, it started to make things accessible. And just 2 weeks ago, well, we were supposed to launch it at Expo West back in early March, but obviously things started changing then. But 2 weeks ago, we launched what our new program is called JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Because as we know, this world needs more diversity and inclusion and justice. So we've been working on that for a couple of years, and we just launched it. We had over 300 people join on our introductory webinar to launch it. And we're really hoping that also brings lots of organizations together, especially in the food and beverage industry, to think about what does it mean to be in a world of JEDIs, of really including and creating diversity, from boards to employees to all the way back to the farmer. And how, I mean, most of the companies, you know, it's minorities and diverse world that creates most of our products, you know, especially here for North America. So how do we celebrate that whole supply chain? So I find collaboration is really the key in getting out of our own organizations, getting out of our own conference rooms, and not to say our employees and our companies aren't the best, because they are, and they're our team, but to bring in other minds, other hearts, other visions, really helps us expand, helps us work at our highest potential, and taps into things that might not be in our own ecosystems that we get used to, whether it's like our home or our village. So it starts to create new energy levels and frequencies, I think, that really allow us to move quicker and create that movement that I was talking about. So big fan of it. And I think, you know, I think there's going to be more of that coming, especially where we are in today's times.
Yeah. Wonderful. So we've got a couple minutes left. We've answered already a few of the questions from the audience, but let me just pose one. So this question for all of you, whichever of you would like to answer, what would you say are the top 3 enablers? Buy-in from the top, formal sustainability roles or positions, business structure, financing, et cetera, to really move sustainability forward and accelerate things. Any advice if someone is trying in their company or their region to move things ahead, what do you think are the things they need to focus on as enablers? Whoever wants to go first.
I could get started. I mean,
Sure.
obviously it's very helpful to have amazing leadership from the top. Two things, I think: leadership and then a focus on policy advocacy and again, collaboration, right? So with Tim Cook's commitments and with Lisa Jackson, not only heading our environmental initiatives, but also heading our government affairs work, that kind of ties in really well. And then of course our employees are very active and are not afraid of prioritizing and being very vocal in prioritizing environment in everything that they do. And so I think a great example was like back in 2014 when Tim Cook was questioned by shareholders who were asking him about why are you investing in renewable energy and other social initiatives. And he stood up and said, you know, well, Apple does a lot of things for reasons besides a profit motive, and said we want to leave the world a better place than we found it. And so leadership from the top, absolutely, but then translating that to policy. I mean, when we urged in 2017, we urged the White House to remain in the Paris Climate Agreement, you know, using our own voices. And we've done many other things like that on the policy side.
Great. Anni, Ahmed, anything to add in terms of key enablers?
Well, I'll just say I think the grassroots, I agree with Bessma that the top down is so important as well as policy, but I'm a huge believer of grassroots. You need the grassroots movement to really support those in greatest need, because there's so much need out there, and without that grassroots, that segment will be forgotten and missed. So I think it's a combination of the top down and the bottoms up, and government obviously and policy can play a big role in it. But however, it's the real hearts that, you know, obviously the government and the top down can bring the autonomy and the money, at least the decision making, but it's really the hearts from the bottoms up that really touch and connect and keep those that are in most need alive. I mean, we have a program right now we just launched at the Numi Foundation to bring thousands of families in the inner city just food, just organic produce for free, and just with that movement from some top down and even bringing in now some of the government and policy, it's really helped us to activate and get thousands of families organic produce in this time really quickly. But if it wasn't for those people that really cared intricately, it couldn't have happened as fast. So we see it all the time on the grassroots from the farmer level. And, you know, obviously we see things on a policy level that really helps to drive it, to at least create some uniformity and an umbrella in which we can all work under.
Awesome.
Oh, it's super heartening, both of you. That was really lovely. I think, unfortunately, from the building sector side, that you know, we need some carrots. It's already a challenging thing. Award programs, competitions, that kind of thing. A lot of people are pushing the envelope. But at some point, you know, if we're going to make kinds of changes that we need to, we're going to need the stick of building code. And Ed Masria of Architecture 23 has developed a zero carbon code for buildings, a performance-based code. Apparently China has adopted it in some form. They can do this quickly. But these are things that we need to move forward, you know, move on quickly. And I'm sure my employees would be horrified hear me advocating for more codes, but this, I mean, that's just what we need to do, because at a certain, price point, if it's not in the code, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I think certainly there's some sectors, and I think buildings are a key one where you need to set standards. And I mean, I like to think of those not so much as the stick, as the guardrails or the safety belts that keep us all in, sort of the on the right path, if you will. And you need to raise the floor. It's great to have. It's vital to have inspirational leaders leading by example and bringing others along. But at a certain point, in some sectors particularly, you need to have standards that raise the floor. Okay, so we're about out of time. It just very quickly. So I mean, I think this has been inspirational and hopeful. Let's break out our crystal balls, and if each of you could just quickly say, give your thoughts on, when we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Business Environmental Awards 20 years from now, what awards will we be looking back at? What are the milestones and innovations that you would hope to see in the coming decades? So 30 seconds each. Bessma, why don't we start with you?
All right. I'd say, I mean, given my role, I would love to see awards for companies who are really fully engaging their supply chain, especially maybe even fully engage supply chains in policy advocacy and what they've been able to overcome together as a full industry. I think also with our focus on using recycled and renewable materials, I would love to see awards coming for recycling innovations.
Awesome. Annie?
Well, I mean, it would be very interesting to have, a sort of a carbon accounting as a piece of the award. But I would hope that that buildings in the future, our built environment integrates more living systems, bring more landscape in. I think that the lessons that we can learn from natural systems and the health it provides to humans is just really immeasurable, and it is something that we need to encourage, and I think it's going to be a big part of what what is going to make the shift. So I don't know how that becomes an award, but that's my hope.
Great. Ahmed, last words.
Yeah, I would say, obviously, since this has been a big focus on climate, I would say companies that are completely eliminating plastic and petroleum, that are really halting the global warming issues to reduce the 1.5 temperature, really doing big measures and small, and getting rid of plastics and doing everything plant-based and compostable. And lastly, it's really about how we're celebrating all parties and farmers, the employees, and bridging the gaps between governments and corporations and NGOs, and creating new sectors in which everyone is thriving and everyone is really being celebrated. So from the climate to the human heart, I think, how are we really lifting all to live this clean future?
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. That's a great way to end the panel. And I'm sorry, for many reasons, we're not in one place. In particular, you can't get a big round of applause from all the people who are listening, but let me applaud you. And I will hand it back to Nicole.